Welcome to episode 5 of The Life and Death of Jeff. In this episode, we'll be continuing our journey through the sordid Jeffrey Epstein scandal by taking a stroll through Jeffrey's infamous island. You'll also be able to listen to my interview with the French designer who helped develop the island and the mysterious so-called temple. And then we'll be diving into another scandal, a honeypot scandal that has never before been fully exposed, and that I can reveal for the first time involved one of Jeffrey's girlfriends, the son of the United Kingdom's Queen Camilla, cocaine, and a dodgy tabloid newspaper. So without further delay, let's push forward on our quest for the truth. An enchanted island haunted by those nymphets of mine and surrounded by a vast misty sea. Lolita, Vladimir Nabokov. The island, nicknamed Little St. Jeff, rises out of the Caribbean and into the warm tropical air, a dusty green teardrop floating in deep blue water. White stone terraces step down toward quiet coves. A single pier stretches outward like a finger testing the temperature of the sea. Sculpted hedges, pristine lawns and palm trees are arranged as if by careful hand. Around the same period of buying the island, Jeffrey began assembling his physical offshore infrastructure. The United States Virgin Islands occupies a peculiar position in American law. It is under US sovereignty, but treated as a separate tax jurisdiction. For Jeffrey, this meant that advisory fees earned from mainland US clients could be booked through Virgin Islands entities and legally taxed at a fraction of what would have been owed in New York. It was offshore without appearing foreign. This was the same logic exploited by global tycoons whose empires run through island jurisdictions, including figures such as Richard Branson, whose island Jeffrey visited and whose companies for decades have routed ownership, licensing and profits through low-tax island regimes. Jeffrey mastered both worlds at once, the private offshore universe of international billionaires and the quasi-domestic offshore territory used by American elites. Internal banking records later showed Jeffrey routing massive wire transfers through Virgin Islands entities labelled only as consulting or services, with layered shell companies shielding beneficial ownership. Prosecutors would later describe his corporate web as a structure deliberately designed to conceal transactions and frustrate scrutiny. The island was not merely a destination, it was a financial instrument. Construction contracts, aviation fuel, maritime services, payrolls, security and logistics all flowed through the same tax advantage architecture. Visitors arrived by private plane into a jurisdiction engineered for barely legal tax evasion and reduced oversight. That was the service that Jeffrey sold. But he did, as Ghislaine Maxwell attests, clearly love his island and saw it as far more than just a convenient tax loophole.
He purchased the island in 1996.
Ghislaine told Todd Blanche.
And he was friendly with the owners. And originally we went to the island as guests of the owners. And then I guess at some point the owners told him they wanted to sell and he decided to purchase it. So the island was very rustic. I loved it. He, of course, had completely different ideas. And I would say there was none of what you were describing at that early period of time. So the frequency was often on the island because he loved it. He really, really loved it. And we would go all the time. Mostly all the early phase was based on improvements that could be made on the island, always going with new architects, new designers, new construction people. I'd say the first 2 years, almost every trip, not everyone, but almost every trip contained an individual who would be brought on board to have an opinion as to how to I don't want to use the word improve the island because I don't think you could improve it, but to, I can't think what the word would be, to develop it, sorry, that's the word.
Okay.
Develop the island, that's the word I'm looking for.
The island itself has become a symbol of the entire scandal and the focus of many a conspiracy theory. Around 30 hectares of rocky hills, forested groves, sheltered inlets and coral-fringed shores graced by a year-round tropical climate. A large main residence was built in a villa style with colonnades, guest villas, a helipad, a private dock, swimming pools, a tennis court, slipways, and roads linking the buildings that he had surrounded by extensively landscaped lawns and gardens. Only reachable by boat or helicopter, the secluded island became his home from home, and a place where he could entertain a variety of famous friends and associates, from Peter Mandelson to Stephen Hawking, all waited on by hired members of staff. Its most distinctive feature, now referred to by the press as the Temple, was a blue and white striped box-shaped building topped with a golden dome. Could it have been built to facilitate his harem in some capacity? Or did it, as many unhinged conspiracy theories would have us believe, house an underground tunnel and chamber used in the trafficking and ritual satanic abuse of children? The evidence tells us that the answer is no. According to construction and permit records, the original plan submitted around 2010 described it as a music pavilion intended to house a grand piano, an instrument of which we already know Epstein was somewhat a master at playing. Somewhat pokey inside compared to the turquoise ceiling cabanas, grand fireplace-adorned main residence, and the comfortable guest pavilions nearby, the two-floored structure was visited by Patrick Barron, a piano tuner who was flown in to work on the piano, and who confirmed that the interior simply consisted of a black grand piano, bookshelves, a dark wood desk, and a portrait of Epstein or the Pope. Dressing the dome outside, two gold bird-like statues on the roof were removed or lost when Hurricane Maria battered the island in 2017. One of the people brought to help develop the island and the temple was famous French architect and designer Robert Couturier. I reached out to Mr. Couturier and, late one night, we discussed his involvement with Jeffrey and Little St. James. The following is a recording of what he told me.
You know, it's interesting for me to be talking about Jeffrey Epstein now. I've known him since 1986, 87. I've known Ghislaine Maxwell also forever. We all kind of belong to the same social circles. So, you know, you meet people and that's just what it is. And she's friendly, she's funny, she's attractive, and she doesn't feel like a criminal. She was lovely, and she kept all the binders with all the pictures of what Jeffrey had in terms of art pieces and furniture and, you know, tchotchkes and all of that. I used to work for Sir James Goldsmith. Jeffrey came to me through one of Jimmy's daughters, Isabel, and then he wanted me to work for him. And I said no. I thought nothing of it. I went to. At the time, he didn't live in that big house on 78th Street. The big house belonged to Les Wexner, and he was doing the house next to it that was half the size. And then I was telling Jimmy, and Jimmy said, "I don't want you to work for him. I don't want him in any of our houses. I don't want him in my life." And he said, "This is a person who provides, you know, other people with young boys and young girls." So when people tell you no one knew until 2010, it's complete bullshit. Everybody knew. And that's what makes it so horrifying that hundreds and hundreds of girls had to go through what it went through, when in fact it was obvious that he was a criminal 40 years ago. No one had evidence because, you know how society functions. I think until it is in the public, most people fail to see. So the people who knew and didn't share his proclivities avoided him very, very carefully. And those who didn't and probably liked what he was offering, stayed with him. When he came to me in 2010, I didn't want to work for him because he came to me then through another friend of mine. And I said, no, I don't want to work for him. And she said, well, you can't really, he's done some awful things, but he's paid his debt to society and he is another person. So, I thought to myself, who am I to judge anyone? I started working for him. And then it became obvious in all of his houses, because I went to all of them, horrible things were happening. When you went upstairs in the house in New York, you had sort of meandering corridors with little rooms that were dark, with photos of very young girls, with hardly pubescent, with little tits. And you had massage tables. You had all of that. When you went to the house when I went to the house in Palm Beach, you had photos of naked girls everywhere. And the thing which I found most astonishing is that the staff never looked you up in the eyes. It was just very weird. And when we went to the house on the island, then this is when it became, you entered. Because I was with him, so we visited all the bungalows. And the first bungalows on the left when you came up, or the two bungalows, they were like bunk beds. And I asked him, I said, but why on earth do you have bunk beds? And he said, well, for the girls. And all of a sudden it became very clear, for the girls. And you had all the rooms, you are on the beach. It was so beautiful, as you see in the pictures. And you would think that all the windows were open and then you'd live inside and outside. No, all the indoor spaces were dark with curtains drawn, and the air conditioning was probably at 58. It was so cold. And then there was a room with computers, and I said, what is that room for? And he said to me, well, this is a room for the girls, because they play on their computers and they do that. And then he said, I want you to do a big protection room for me underneath the pool. So we would have lifted the entire pool area and put a protection room downstairs. And I said, what do you want in that protection room? He says, well, I want beds. I want beds on casters that we can move around, beds for two people. This is when I realized on the island what he was living on the island, that I decided I was not going to work for him. So I had started to work, I'd sketched a few things for the libraries, for some bathrooms, for stuff like that. But, his bedroom, some things, but there was nothing really all that substantial. I mean, honestly, there isn't one client of that caliber who is not fussy. Nobody takes the first idea as the answer to all their questions. So it's not the fussiness that sort of upset me. It truly is what transpired from him. Yeah, I think that, yes, it changed them, I'm sure, a lot. And I think that, you have to think about it. I mean, this was 2010, 2011. And I think after that, it became so very obvious what he was doing that I think he put less attention into the island. And I think that, he did less. I don't think he worked on his houses the way that he had done before, whether it was in Florida or even in France or in New Mexico.
So he had that section built, the woman's section, which does sort of mimic the harem.
Yeah.
This temple, it began as a music pavilion, didn't it?
He did.
What shifted that? At what point in time did he sort of move away from being a...
I think when he probably realized that nobody was going to go there to listen to music. And then he found a way to, to make it attractive and to make it like, it's the same thing than when you have a big park in a house in a country, and then you have a pavilion.
With regards to the conspiracy theories, they're absolute bonkers. I don't believe that there are secret tunnels or there were any rituals or any of that.
No, there was nothing like that.
With regards to the design, so around this time, and the emails that have come out from him show this as well, that exactly around that time, he started really getting into the harem stuff and sultans, and particularly in Marrakesh and harems there. And some of them are similar in design. So did you help with the design of what was built?
I never felt that someone like Jeffrey Epstein had any inclination for the spiritual world. The idea of evil worshipping and all that is, in my opinion, entire bullshit.
Yeah.
And I think that he built it because it was a fun thing to build.
Yeah.
But I think that was it. I mean, and when we visited it together, it never, felt as if it was something so special. And I never tried to find anything in it.
And it's such a ridiculous thing. It really is. Forgive me, but it's to do with the patterns. Because conspiracy theorists will focus on anything. If it looks odd, they will create a mythos around it. And they focus on the temple because it looks odd.
Well, of course. And we all, I mean, even the builders and everybody, knew that it was weird.
They look at the patterns and people say, what does it symbolize? Who created the patterns? I don't know if you know what I mean. On the raised plinth, the platform.
I think that I want to debunk the whole thing because this is absurd. I think that, as a designer, if a client tells you, I want a floor pattern outside, outside my pavilion to be original, you go in your head and you start designing patterns, and then you come up with one, you send it to him, and he says, great. That's how it happens.
Is that exactly how it happened? So it's not influenced by, I don't know.
No, it's not. Jeffrey Epstein was not cultured that way,
No.
you know. And I have zero, but maybe I'm wrong, and maybe, you know, a lot of things happened after I left, but I absolutely don't believe in any of that.
Do you help design that pattern that's on the...
Well, I have designed, to a degree, I must have done a couple of sketches for it, but, you know, one of my assistants went to him one day at the townhouse up here because he had to give him some drawing or something. And he went in, and Jeffrey Epstein was in a room with other people, and he was actually porning a girl who looked hardly 15. My assistant left this room, this house, horrified, and it's perfectly elegant gentleman. And he told me, he said, I don't want to be involved with that person. I know that he was very admirative of Jimmy Goldsmith, who had that life. But, you know, Jimmy was not a sex deviant. He had mistresses and wives and girlfriends and all of that. But they were all, you know, reasonable ladies who knew exactly what they were getting into. And he wasn't picking them up out of, blue-collar neighborhoods, promising them the world. You know, I don't think Jimmy ever misled anyone. I think that Jeffrey Epstein did mislead all these poor girls in telling them that he was going to pay for this, going to pay for that, which he did, by the way.
Tuition fees, life, clothes, etc.
They'd do anything for it without understanding that they were selling their souls to the devil. And honestly, I understand your point that it's not all black and white, but I think, as far as I'm concerned, someone like Jeffrey Epstein is pretty black, and I think he seemed. I mean, no, I just couldn't stand him. There was nothing in him that was appealing, honestly. A lot of people, my friend, other girl in New York who's having so much trouble because of him, the public relation.
I'm not sure.
Yes, you know her. She got into huge problems because of her friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. She asked me, she says, well, because she became friendly with Jeffrey in the last 2 or 3 years of Jeffrey's life. And she organized dinner parties in his house on 70th Street. And she said to me, well, but I didn't know what he was. I didn't know what he was doing. And I told her, I said, listen, everybody knew what he was doing. Everybody knew. So if people came to his house, they chose not to see. But in the same way that, we think that the Weinsteins are great people or whatever. And you think, oh, well, the Weinsteins are the best, movie promoters in the world. And so you should be friendly to them. They're all horrible people. I came back from the island with him, and I was sitting in his plane, and I was looking at his hands. First of all, I was very embarrassed because when you get to the airport, and if the person who is, the owner of the plane and is a sex offender, then you have the police. So you have the police, and it's so, you sort of try not to see and try to not pay attention, but it's very difficult not to. And in that flight back, I told him, I said, listen, I can't work for you anymore. I just can't. I'm sorry. I can't. And that was the end of my relationship with him. And he called me for an entire month, on every single phone line. wanting to speak to me, and I didn't want to speak to him. And that was it. I was very lucky because I could leave and I could give him back his money and not feel that like I was going to die of hunger, you know. He never caught me in the way that he probably caught other people. You know, if you give them that much money, they can't leave. And I think that for all the people who worked on the island, who were the builders and the people who would drive the boats and all of the helicopters or whatever, what could they say? And I remember that we were looking with one of the girls who had become one of his assistants. She was going to get married, and he was going to buy her a house. It's pretty powerful, you know, when you are
financial control.
Yeah, a 24-year-old girl who's marrying her dream boy, and then she's getting a $1.5 million house, and you know, as a wedding present. I think it's hard to say no. I fled when I realized what was happening. I really did. I just don't want anything to do with it. Morally, I think that, I mean, I'm not a priest of any sort, huh? And I'm certainly no better than anyone, but I think there are just some things that are unacceptable. And I think to set up a life to abuse people who are weaker than you is beyond contempt. And I think that, you know, a lot of people shared in his magnificence as far as the presence of young women or whatever. And I think that those people are worthy of contempt too.
And then did he not try and sue you or something?
Of course he tried.
Yeah.
Because when I left, I told him that this was it. You know, there was the hours that I'd spent on the job. And he said, I want all my money back. And I said, well, you really can't have all your money back. And he said, well, his brother then got into contact with me and threatened to sue me. So I said, I absolutely don't care. I'll send you all your money. And I sent him all his money back. And after that, you know, I don't want to have anything to do. I think I saw Guylaine afterwards. I even had a dinner in town. We were only 4 of us at the dinner party in somebody's house. And she was perfectly wonderful and chatty and, you know, so British in her ways. And that was, honestly, I had a very hard time believing that she was guilty of anything. And I think it was sort of a Stockholm syndrome, you know, of having had the problems that she had growing up, and then meeting Jeffrey and who was like her father, and I think it was all of those horrible things, and that's what, you know, metaphor.
Yeah. And when you left the island, what had been completed at that point, and what was unfinished?
Nothing was completed.
No.
Nothing was completed. The master bedroom was not completed. It was completely demolished. His bathroom was demolished as well. The girls' quarters were also demolished. Everything that had begun, you know. And also he wanted me to draw as we were building, which is horrible, because then he was very demanding of my time, and he said, well, you have to come to Palm Beach, you have to come to the island, you have to, but I had, you know, I have other things to do, you know, other clients to take care of, and you know, I remember when I was in a client's plane, and we were flying, I don't know, from Palm Beach somewhere, and he called me, and I hid behind the clients, and I said, you know, I'm with this client, I can't do anything, I can't come to you. It was just, you know, I was trying to find excuses not to show up.
Yeah.
So
that's when you know that it's definitely, you did the right thing to leave.
Leave.
Yeah, and the music parlor, pavilion, whatever you want to call it, temple. What sort of state was that in when you left? How
When I
far?
left, it was white. It
Uh,
was in white, and it was, prepped to become whatever he wanted it to become. But
yeah.
the funny thing is, which really amused me, is that when you looked at Jeffrey's house, the appearance of it was that it was sumptuous. But when you went inside, and for me, whose job it is to see the difference between good and not so good, I was looking at this. It's bad,
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because see, there are some parts that I think I like in his taste, but I'd say 90% is quite terrible. It seems almost luxurious on the outside. It's almost like a facade. When you step inside, when you get deep within, there's nothing there. If that makes sense, similar to the so-called temple. From the outside, it's some grand. I find it very interesting, actually, that structure. But from the outside, that looks very, very interesting, gets your eye, very chic. But then when you see the inside and how they constructed it in the end, because I think he tried to cut some corners, and it seems like the prop, similar to some of his other buildings. It seems almost like a prop, like he just wants things for show. He doesn't. There's no substance to it,
But I think he was very much like that. It was all about appearances and show. But on the other end, he was truly evil. And the thing is, what made me think lately about what's happening to the British royal family is akin to what happened to the French royal family with one scandal, like the necklace affair, which really brought the monarchy down because it destroyed all the respect that, people had for their rulers. And I'm looking at it and thinking, I don't know how long they have. That's a scandal that is so tremendous that we haven't seen, the majority of it. And I think when the whole thing comes out, it's going to be a wave of mud that's going to be very difficult to get out of.
By now, Jeffrey had a reputation for being a mysterious figure dripping in sleaze. His sexual appetite having gone completely out of control some time ago, he now made sure that he had a long list of women to visit him every day for happy ending massages and BDSM sessions.
I saw Epstein with women.
Gieland told Todd Blanche.
He would have women around him, or women on the plane, or women in his house. Those women were very interested. What my characterization of the relationships between all women that I saw with him and him was characterized by, their interest in him as I would see it. And by that I mean I never saw anybody who didn't want to be with him, maybe socially or whatever. I never saw anybody not under any form of duress in any type of situation where they were, as I would characterize it, looking uncomfortable or in any way distressed. In the entire time I was with him, or traveled with him, I never saw that. So any time I saw anybody with him, they were happy to be with him. He would ask people all the time, whoever you were, to massage his feet. He'd be sitting there and he'd have somebody massage his feet or squeeze his shoulders, or I saw that a lot. It was an ubiquitous interaction, if you will. So I did see that. I saw physicality, but not anything that was I don't know how to characterize it. Anything that looked aggressive, I suppose, to define that. So I never saw an aggressive move. I never saw anything that was
Non-consensual.
Yeah, well, thank you. Okay. I never saw anything that was non-consensual. So if he, well, maybe they didn't. I never saw anything that looked like they didn't like the hug, or I never saw what I would characterize as anything that was unconsensual. I did see women who could have been, less than normally clad for massage, but especially on the island where they would be in a bikini or possibly even topless. I saw him being physical with women. I did see that, but nothing that was not consensual. And
Do you accept that at some point, and we talked about this yesterday about how Mr. Epstein changed, but at some point, Mr. Epstein definitely preferred younger women.
I accept.
And I think you said yesterday, but say it again since we're talking about it. Is that something that you, in your mind, one of the areas where he changed from when you first met him until later?
So I just also want to be clear, I never understood that change to encompass children. I did see from when I met him, he was involved or friends with, or whatever, however you want to characterize it, with women who were in their 20s. And then the slide to 18 or younger looking women. But I never considered that this would encompass criminal behavior.
Were you ever in a massage room with him and a masseuse?
Yes.
Okay. When was that?
Well, he would come in sometimes and he would say, oh, give her a massage here, or he would grab my, but not often. I mean, he did come in from time to time.
Were you ever in a massage room with him with a masseuse that was naked, or giving him any sexual favors?
I never saw that.
Okay.
That I remember.
Okay. Did any of the masseuses ever discuss with you giving that they gave sexual favors to Epstein?
No.
Did you ever see an underage girl go into a massage room with Mr. Epstein?
No.
If you had seen that, what would you have done? Would you have left?
I can't even conceive of, I can't imagine what I would have done.
Did you ever observe Mr. Epstein masturbating during a massage?
Yes.
I
mean, when I'd seen him on a massage table, I had seen him masturbate. I don't know if there was a masseuse present, but I've seen him on a massage table.
Okay.
Sorry,
Okay.
I just...
Did you ever see him masturbate with a masseuse, with a naked woman, either giving him a massage or reporting to give him a massage?
I don't remember seeing that.
Did you give him massages, by the way? I mean, there's a photo of you rubbing his feet, and I think...
I certainly have been in the massage room with him, and I have certainly rubbed his feet and when he would talk, but I was not a masseuse, and I didn't perform massage on him.
Did you, over the years, did you pay the masseuses?
It was typically not my job, but if there was nobody else, normally, so in Palm Beach, the houseman would give the money, and in New York he would do that because I wouldn't be in New York when I don't remember ever paying a masseuse in New York.
So it wasn't your job
No.
on a regular basis to pay the masseuses. So if there was a masseuse 7 days a week, it wasn't expected that 7 days a week you would be the one handing them money.
Mostly I would not. I'm not saying I never did it because that wouldn't be true, but it was not my job to pay him. I mostly recall he would either pay them himself, he would have money, or the houseman, and I think some of them would have probably received checks. I just want to say that I remember there'd be times when he'd be getting a massage and I would be in the room, I could be on his feet and somebody else could be on his feet and we could be talking. So there is that.
But that's not, you're not talking about something that's sexual, you're talking about literally just rubbing his feet.
Yes.
Okay.
But I mean...
No, that's not what I'm talking about.
No,
I'm saying...
But they could be, sometimes the women might be topless who were giving that, so you could say that was sexual in that context.
No, I'm talking about the repeated reports of certain sex acts happening with you present and even participating.
No. At that time, he had moved me out of the main house. I had moved into an office with John Alessi, the former butler, under the stairs. So I had an office where I would be that was not part of part of the house. If I saw people, and I'm not saying I didn't see people come to give a massage, that wouldn't be true either, but if I saw someone, let's say, I don't remember ever seeing anybody that I would characterize as a child. Now, specifically, someone who accused me of seeing her, at the time when she came, if I did see her, and I don't believe I did see her or meet her at all, but if she did, she was, as she's described herself now, was very mature and looked in her 20s. Never recall at any time seeing what I would characterize as a child coming to give him a massage and going upstairs. Did I see people come? I absolutely did. I just didn't see children. I didn't see anybody I would think of as a child.
Did he seem to you to be a sexual deviant, or I don't know what the right way to describe it, but when you say to me, he was getting massages every single day, right? So young women were everywhere, multiple massages on some days, flew with the women to the island, to New York, Paris. There's always women, they're always rubbing him, giving him massages. I think it would be an understatement to say that that's not normal.
I agree.
Was he a creepy guy when it came to that sort of thing? Was he protective of how he looked publicly, image-wise? Like, at the time, what was it like?
I think if he had been creepy, like as you would define and you would expect someone who was living that lifestyle to be creepy, I don't think the women would have been there. I don't think that they thought of him as creepy. And if they did, I never saw them behave like he was being weird. Was it a lot? Yes, it was, for sure. I found it overwhelming, and I couldn't understand why it was interesting, because to me it's not interesting. But he, as he defined it, he found it invigorating. He liked being with younger people, and now I'm just younger people, I'm just saying, because they gave him ideas and they were up to date on music and
yeah, but that's
slang.
different than like a masseuse coming every day.
I'm just telling you what he was saying
Yeah.
to me. I mean, to me, I just found it a drag and difficult and annoying. But understand, I wasn't the only person present. So this time in the 2000s, you're talking about other people like Sarah Cullen, who was around, who interfaced with him. I didn't have to. She was really interfacing with Epstein at this point in time in his life. She was running she was his assistant. I did look for masseuses. I did. I went to spas, and if I met somebody who said she was a masseuse, I did not check their credentials. And of course, if she was attractive, I did introduce her, yes. If I met friends who were interested, he was constantly asking me to meet new and interesting people. I did do that. The bulk of what I read, he did not have sex. So that is consistent with what he told me, actually. And his masturbating, that is also consistent with what I knew myself. And I'm going to use a bad word.
Please, you can use whatever word you need. Yes.
Blowjob.
Okay.
He liked blowjobs.
Okay.
That I did observe. And he didn't seem to have any erectile dysfunction for blowjobs. But sex he didn't have. So when I read the stories about the allegations of sexual rape, I find that challenging, because that was not his modus operandi, from my perspective.
But when you read about blowjobs, that would be consistent with kind of what you...
That would be consistent, as would masturbation, yes.
Did you have conversations with any of those, with women, about what Mr. Epstein liked or what would make him happy or things like that?
I don't have any memory of telling anybody about that. I think I may have joked, like saying, oh my God, like from a Sex and the City scene, that, he's... But not, I never instruct, the question you're asking me, sorry, let's just be clear. Did I ever instruct anyone how to pleasure Mr. Epstein? Your question, no. I just want to say, the idea that I would have to explain to a woman how to satisfy Mr. Epstein is patently absurd, because he clearly was able to explain himself. He didn't need an interlocutor to explain what he liked. He's been doing this, obviously, or this, some version of this story his whole life, and did not require any help from me.
The women, mostly beautiful aspiring models, artists, sugar babies, prostitutes, and any of their friends whom Jeffrey found attractive, would come and go every day, with Jeffrey receiving at least 3 massages daily, and some of the women, at least his favourites, were often invited to come to his island. They often came in small groups, massaging his feet, straddling his back, and then, when he flipped over, letting him use vibrators on them while they did one of his favourite things, squeezing his nipples and giving him oral sex. In between massages, Jeffrey would often work while the women enjoyed the island, went jet skiing, sunbathed by the pool or on the beach. They would sleep in the cabanas, each seemingly taking turns to visit Jeffrey whenever her wanted a massage, though they would all frequently also have lunch with him outside on one of the verandas or spend time with him watching movies in the main house. Oddly, it doesn't seem that Jeffrey's close girlfriend at the time, British-born Shelley Lewis, was particularly bothered about the arrangement, continuing to spend time with Jeffrey, despite it being obvious that he was taking unfaithfulness to another level. One of the women who visited his island was blonde-haired, blue-eyed Anuska Honey de Giorgio, who, like Shelley, also came from England. Born in the late 1970s in Ascot, Surrey, by 1993 Anuska was a 16-year-old fashion model navigating the competitive London agency scene. The daughter of a wealthy British financier and a former debutante model, she possessed an upper-class pedigree but carried the emotional fractures of her parents' recent bitter divorce. Anuska claims to have been introduced to Jeffrey after being spotted by Ghislaine in a hotel lobby in Paris. The official introduction to Jeff took place in London, initiating a calculated 10-year career mentorship whereby Jeffrey bankrolled her high-end modelling portfolio shoots, bought her expensive designer wardrobe pieces, and footed the bill for luxury, first-class flights across the Atlantic. Over the next decade, she was routinely flown to his Upper East Side townhouse in New York, his Parisian apartment, his Palm Beach mansion, and his private island. They would spend time together, engage in sexual activity, and Jeffrey would shower her with expensive gifts and, as with his other young women, act as somewhat of a sugar daddy to her. Anuska had turned down a place at Oxford University to pursue a career as a model and actress. Working as a model for Playboy, she became connected to numerous high-profile stars, including having a relationship with Baywatch's David Hasselhoff. She also allegedly had ties to Donald Trump. In November 1997, The Mirror on Sunday reported the following in its confidential gossip page, written by the late Chris Hutchins. Just weeks after ditching his second wife, America's best-known billionaire Donald Trump has fallen under the spell of a 20-year-old English girl. Trump, 50, who has failed in his bid to secure the services of Princess Diana's butler Paul Burrell, was in search of another British trophy when he met London model Anuska de Giorgio at a party in Manhattan. Several millionaires already had their eyes on Anuska, but she was there with Robert Maxwell's daughter Ghislaine, who has introduced several of her attractive friends to the property developer. And none of his would-be rivals owned a vast mansion in Florida like Donald does. Mar-a-Lago, where I have dined with him, and his outgoing wife Marla, is enough to make any young girl go weak at the knees. After their meeting, Trump flew Madame Maxwell and the model south to the Sunshine State, where all three enjoyed a happy weekend together. When they returned to New York, Anuska was installed in one of Donald's many apartments there. Ms. de Giorgio likes older men. She went out once or twice with Joanna Lumley's ex-husband Jeremy Lloyd, who is 45 years her senior. Whilst never having accused Donald Trump of any inappropriate behaviour, Anuska has since claimed that, whilst over the legal age of consent, she was abused by Jeffrey for several years. Jeffrey Epstein manipulated me, coerced me, and abused me, she told the Evening Standard. He cannot fathom what he did to us. The abuse, spanning several years, was devaluing beyond measure and affected my ability to form and maintain healthy relationships, both in my work and my personal life. Using the pseudonym Kate, she was also a prosecution witness against Ghislaine Maxwell at her trial. However, the judge instructed the jury during that trial that the testimony of neither Kate nor Annie Farmer could be used to indict Gillen, because both were over age when they claimed they were abused. It was later revealed during that trial that Anushka had sent Jeffrey letters whilst he was in prison and had even offered to send him photographs of herself. And something else was also briefly touched upon in that trial: the revisiting of a famous tabloid scandal, since long forgotten and never fully revealed until now. For the record, I see no reason for Anushka to have been allowed to use a pseudonym when acting as a witness. Outside the courtroom, she willfully sold her story to the press and has given numerous interviews using her full name. But it is because of that pseudonym being used that journalists have been unable to tell you the truth about her involvement in an infamous incident that pocketed her tens of thousands of pounds. It is ironic that Anushka's middle name is Honey, for, curiously, while she was still close with Jeffrey, she acted as a honeypot to entrap the son of Queen Camilla in a cocaine scandal. Tom Parker Bowles was born in London on the 18th of December 1974, the first child of Camilla Shand and Andrew Parker Bowles. His father was a senior British Army officer, a former cavalryman and an old friend of Prince Charles. His mother, who would eventually become Queen Camilla, had herself been part of the same aristocratic and equestrian social world as Charles since the 1960s, and had long been in love with and having an affair with Charles himself. The Parker Bowles and Windsor circles therefore overlapped long before Tom was born. Indeed, Prince Charles, now our king, was not merely an acquaintance of the family. He was chosen as Tom's godfather. It was an unusual arrangement given Charles's history with Camilla, who had previously dated him before marrying Andrew Parker Bowles in 1973 and had continued their affair during her marriage, but it reflected how close the families already were. Charles and Andrew had played polo together, and Charles was a frequent visitor to the Parker Bowles family home. Tom and his younger sister Laura grew up within that unusually interconnected world of country estates, royal acquaintances, polo, racing, and London society. Tom's childhood, by his own later description, was a happy one. He and Laura were raised principally in Wiltshire, first at Bolehide Manor and later at Middlewick House, and attended prestigious schools before Tom went to Eton and then Worcester College, Oxford. By the late 1990s, he had moved into public relations. In 1997, he joined Dennis Davidson Associates as a junior publicist, working in the film and entertainment world. It was a natural environment for somebody with his background and social connections. He attended premieres and parties, mixed with actors, publicists and journalists, and became increasingly visible in London society pages, and by all accounts he was a likeable, fun person to be around. He was, in the language of the newspapers of the time, a partygoer. He lived with his sister in a West London flat and became a familiar figure at film premieres and fashionable gatherings. In April 1999, for example, Laura's 21st birthday party at the Cabaret Club in Chelsea, which Tom helped organise, generated its own little newspaper story when one drunken guest exposed himself through a taxi window to photographers and another urinated in the street. Tom was increasingly part of the young London social scene that newspapers were beginning to follow obsessively. He was, to some extent, a socialite. The clubs mattered because the newspapers were not merely interested in what these young people did professionally. They were interested in where they went at night, who they knew, and, increasingly, what gossip or scandals they could find out about them. Tom was particularly valuable to the press because of the people around him. His friendship with Prince William had become substantially closer after William completed his GCSEs. Contemporary reporting said that Tom visited William at St James's Palace and that their socialising extended beyond occasional family functions. During the Easter period of 1998, Tom and Laura spent 5 days at Birkhall, the Queen Mother's Scottish residence on the Balmoral estate, as guests of Charles and in the company of William. They also attended Prince Harry's birthday celebrations later that year. The newspapers therefore began treating Tom not simply as Camilla Parker Bowles' son, but as part of the social orbit of a future king. There was a particular irony to this. Tom himself later rejected the suggestion that he had somehow been an elder brother or major influence on William and Harry. They had their own lives, he suggested, and enough problems without him lecturing them. But in 1999, the newspapers saw the relationship very differently. The first drug incident had taken place just 4 years earlier. In 1995, while studying at Oxford and aged 20, Tom was arrested after police found him in possession of cannabis and ecstasy. Contemporary reports said he and another young man were stopped in South London after leaving a nightclub. Tom admitted that the drugs were for personal use. He was released with a police caution, and Oxford decided not to discipline him. That incident did not destroy his prospects. He continued at Oxford and subsequently entered public relations. But he had made himself a constant target for journalists and the paparazzi, eager as ever to bag themselves a saleable story. In the spring of 1999, the News of the World had become particularly aggressive in pursuing drug stories involving celebrities and public figures. The newspaper had a long history of sensational investigations, undercover operations, and controversial, often unethical reporting techniques. Its reputation for pushing the boundaries of acceptable journalism was already well established. In 1994, the paper had been involved in the controversial honey trap involving Lady Bienvenida Buck and former chief of the Defence Staff, Sir Peter Harding. In 1995, it published allegations concerning Judge Anthony Thornton and prostitutes, followed by video footage. The paper's investigative culture became increasingly associated with its investigations editor, Maja Mahmood, who specialised in elaborate undercover stings. Mahmood had previously been dismissed from the Sunday Times after an investigation into dishonest and inappropriate behaviour, but the News of the World subsequently employed him as one of its most celebrated investigators. By 1998 and 1999, the paper was running a succession of increasingly elaborate drug stings. Former Blue Peter presenter Richard Bacon was exposed over cocaine use in a London nightclub and lost his BBC job. Radio 2 DJ Johnny Walker was secretly filmed in a hotel room and subsequently faced drugs charges, also ultimately being suspensed from the BBC. Actor John Alford was caught in a sting in which Mahmood posed as an Arab sheikh, offering him a lucrative entertainment opportunity. Alford eventually supplied cocaine and cannabis and was imprisoned. The paper's methods had become sufficiently controversial that the ethics of entrapment were being debated in Parliament and the courts. Critics argued that the News of the World was sometimes creating the crime it purported to expose. The paper's editor, Phil Hall, defended the practice on the grounds that the newspaper normally began with prior information about a person's behaviour and used subterfuge only to obtain evidence. The editor's code allowed subterfuge where there was a legitimate public interest and the information could not be obtained by other means. Tom Parker Bowles became their biggest target. The operation began with a tip-off. According to The Independent, someone who had attended a party with Tom went to newspapers because of his friendship with Prince William. The stated concern was that Tom should slow down and wean himself off drugs. The source was apparently shopping the story around Fleet Street while showing their true motive by asking for payment should the story go to print. The Sunday Times obtained enough information to publish its own account, but the News of the World wanted more. Thus, its editor-in-chief sent Nadia Cohen to Cannes to help orchestrate a honey trap operation. The operation at Cannes went just as planned. Cohen met with a woman, the so-called friend of Tom, who had been trying to ship the story around Fleet Street. And that woman was none other than Anouska Honey de Giorgio. Tom was in Cannes for the film festival, working for Dennis Davidson Associates. The festival was in full swing, and he had ventured over to a party at the Soho House Boat. Acting as a honeypot, Anouska was paid tens of thousands of pounds by the News of the World. She then headed over to Tom during the party, flirted with him, and introduced him to Cohen, lying to him that Cohen was her friend. Knowing that Cohen was secretly recording the entire encounter, Anouska then asked Tom if he could find them some cocaine. In response, he admitted to Cohen that he used drugs, as many others did at the time, and Anouska and Cohen, undoubtedly grinning like Cheshire cats, left that night with exactly what they wanted. Cohen had bagged herself a big story. Anouska had earned herself a stack of cash. The next day, much to the surprise and despair of the royal family, the News of the World published the following headline in big bold letters across the front page: "This is Camilla's son high on coke." The newspaper alleged that Tom had told a friend he had done a line with somebody he had met the previous night. Undercover journalists reportedly overheard the conversation at a pavement cafe on the Friday. He was also reported as saying that he could arrange a drug supply for a society woman and referring to a place where cocaine was available. But there was no toxicology test. There was no police seizure of cocaine from Tom. There was no criminal prosecution arising from the conversation, and Tom's later account directly contradicts the suggestion that he was intoxicated when the undercover encounter took place. In fact, though foolishly talking about drugs in the presence of a complete stranger, Tom was captured in the secret recording as clearly admitting that he could, in fact, not get any cocaine for Anuska or Cohen, and the photograph used by the News of the World on its front page merely showed him walking outside with no signs of drug use. The actual recording of the honeypot sting has never actually been released. Instead, quotes were printed, and then, when it was understood that they weren't sensational enough, the story was exaggerated. During Gielin's 2021 trial, to raise concerns over her credibility, Anuska's betrayal for cash of Tom in Cannes was brought back into public view, though only briefly touched upon when Gielin's defense lawyer Bobby Sternheim cross-examined Anuska. Sternheim first asked her if she had been involved in a custody dispute concerning the father of her child, whereby it has been alleged that Anuska asked a friend to plant drugs on him so that he would lose custody. She denied doing so. Sternheim then moved backwards in time. She asked Anuska whether, in the late 1990s, she had been involved with a man connected to the royal family. Anuska confirmed that she knew who Sternheim was talking about. Sternheim asked whether the two had been friends. Anuska corrected her, not friends, but acquaintances, saying that they had spoken a couple of times. Then Sternheim asked about Cannes. Anuska confirmed that she and the man, Tom's name was kept anonymous during the trial, had interacted at the Cannes Film Festival. Sternheim asked whether she had been approached by a tabloid to engage the man in a particular situation. Not exactly, Anuska replied uncomfortably. Sternheim asked whether she had been asked to encourage him to get her cocaine. Anuska lied and answered that she hadn't. Sternheim then asked whether a tabloid had approached her to have the man recorded. Again, Anuska lied, saying she had never been approached by a tabloid to have him recorded, though she accepted that he had indeed been recorded. Pressed further and under oath, she then accepted that the recording captured a conversation between the two of them in which she tried to get him to obtain drugs. She accepted that the incident became a major tabloid story because of his connection to the royal family. The questioning then reached the most important point. Sternheim put to her that she had been paid approximately £40,000 for her involvement. Anuska denied it, lying again, this time insisting that she had not been paid anything. Frustratingly, after several objections to the line of questioning were sustained by the judge, they moved on to a different subject. Regardless, at the time, the scandal must have proved a source of intrigue and entertainment for Jeffrey Epstein, who was also well known for enjoying causing mischief behind the scenes for powerful individuals, and his one-time sexual partner Anuska being involved was the icing on the cake. Up until now, there is no evidence to suggest that Jeffrey had engaged in any form of sexual relationship with an underage female. On the contrary, though undoubtedly a sex pest who overstepped the line, at times even into sexual assault, the women he surrounded himself with in Hugh Hefner fashion were beautiful young women in their early 20s. But that would all change, and he would end up on a path to his own ultimate destruction after he was introduced to one young woman in particular. Here it is important to mention the following. When I first spoke to Jeffrey's brother, Mark Epstein, over the telephone, though a fierce advocate of his belief that Jeffrey was murdered rather than that he committed suicide, he was quick to warn me against wasting time on trying to prove Jeffrey's innocence, an endeavour I had no intention of embarking on. His reasoning was simple. My brother is not innocent, he candidly told me. He liked pussy, he liked women, but some of them he slept with, it turns out, were underage. When, in 2006, he first got into trouble with the police, he asked me to stop by his place and told me he was stupid, that he'd had massages from young girls. Most of the females who found themselves in Jeffrey's orbit were introduced by their friends. Indeed, most of those women themselves went on to invite their own friends, continuing a pattern that went on and on, ensuring that Jeffrey had a constant stream of women to satisfy his undeniably out-of-control addiction to sexual pleasure. Contrary to popular belief, however, few of the women were recruited by members of Jeffrey's staff. In fact, his special assistants, including Sarah Kellen and Leslie Groff, mainly, along with their other many standard duties, organised the massages rather than sought out the women who provided them. But there was an individual who claimed to have been directly recruited by Geelan. Her name was Virginia Giuffre, now sadly dead after taking her life in 2025. But back then, she was 17, the minimum age to legally be allowed to provide massages in the states of Florida and New York. The two first came into each other's orbit, according to Virginia, at Donald Trump's exclusive spa and resort, Mar-a-Lago. And though, many years later, an imprisoned Geelan would voice her regret that she ever met Jeffrey Epstein, it is fair to assume from what happened next that she rused the day she met Virginia even more. Thanks for listening to episode 5 of The Life and Death of Jeff. In next week's episode, we'll be continuing our descent into the sordid bowels of the Epstein scandal by trawling through the life of Virginia Giuffre. You'll be able to listen to her true, unreported biography. We'll explore what the media have been hiding from you, and we'll be listening to some of my interviews with her former boyfriends. Until then, please don't forget to share this episode on social media to help get the truth out. But, most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful week.